Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Well, welcome.
Thanks, Stu.
Thanks for joining me. You know, I was reading about David Freeman, who was quite a pioneer in the development of electrical generation in the United States, in Tennessee, New York, Sacramento, and in Los Angeles. And going back to the 1970s or so, he pointed out the need for us to start to look towards conservation because he said electricity is so important. He called it the oxygen of the modern economy. And I agree with him. So you head up the organization that provides us with that oxygen. How are we doing? Are we breathing well? Are we going to have enough to supply as we move into the future? I want to discuss how we're going to get there.
Yeah, wow, interesting quote, and a very interesting one to think about. I would say, I would take it even further. Electricity is probably the oxygen of the economy, but I think electricity is really one of the things that defines our quality of life, just generally as individuals and communities, and it's something that we take for granted where we live here in BC, and we're lucky that we can do that.
Until the power goes out.
Until the power goes out, which is a good little reminder for us of the conditions that other parts of the world grow used to. We have highly reliable power in British Columbia. You know, we have actually Vancouver-Burnaby has the highest reliability in all of Canada. We have very affordable power. We have the third lowest rates in North America. We have very clean power. We have, last year we operated 98% clean generation. We have an incredible system and one that gives us that quality of life. It's good that people can take it for granted and then every once in a while just have a tiny reminder of what it provides. But I guess in some ways you could say our job at BC Hydro is to ensure that it is just there. It's there when you flip on the light switch. It's there when you press on the coffee maker. And that's what we work hard to do.
But that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So we as the average person don't see that happening. And there's so many different components that go into it. For one, what is the great benefit or strength of having hydroelectricity as our main source of power generation?
Yeah. So I think most British Columbians know it's a great story of the vision that British Columbia could actually look to its natural resources, look to the Peace and Columbia rivers as the source of this very reliable, affordable, clean power. And we have a system that actually has about 80 dams, 79 dams to be accurate.
Throughout the province.
Throughout the province, but mostly concentrated on the Peace and Columbia systems. And that's the backbone of our system. We also have about 25% of our energy is produced by intermittent independent power producers.
Such as run-of-river?
Run-of-river, wind, solar. You can think of them as intermittent because they provide power when it's available, when that resource is available. And they get shaped or firmed, to use a little bit of jargon, but I think you can understand what that means, that when we can bring in generation from large hydroelectric because it has this great storage capacity. You can draw out of the reservoirs as you need it, and so you can make other forms of power capable of providing part of the energy in the system because you have this great flexible backbone of large hydroelectric power.
So how responsive is that hydroelectric generation system? Like all of a sudden, let's say the demand goes down, are you able to scale back on production in a timely manner?
Yes, we can operate within seconds on the system. We have a control center, which is quite an impressive thing to see, which is watching all these computer screens of all of our major generating assets, and they are sort of calling the shots, as you might say, in terms of where we're drawing the generation from in any given moment or over the course of a day, which will be based on the needs that our customers have, but also where some of the needs may be in neighboring jurisdictions where we may be trading. It's a highly responsive system, very flexible.
And so it allows us to hang on to as much water that's behind that dam as we possibly can?
That's right. Yeah, once you generate power, you can't store it. So you want to, ideally, be able to generate as you need it in the amounts that you need it. And that's where large hydroelectric is a tremendous asset to have. Other examples that give you that kind of flexibility are generally not as clean as hydroelectric. Other examples of where you know you can draw what you need would be gas, for example. And so that's a great other, we call it a capacity resource. But of course it's not as clean.
So you can turn gas on and off in a responsive manner.
You can turn it up, turn it down, but it's not as clean as large hydroelectric. The intermittent types of electricity that we have in the system, as I've said, it's a quarter of our system. Run of river, biomass. Well, biomass is quite good actually in terms of being able to draw upon it when you need it. But the other intermittents in our system can exist in our system and still give us that tremendous reliability because we have the large hydroelectric backbone.
So next door to us in Alberta, they rely heavily on coal-fired generation.
Right.
What are the downsides of that, and how does that fit in with the overall strategy here in Western Canada? Where does BC Hydro help them both in supplying extra and maybe taking extra when they can't scale back?
Right. So, Alberta has very exciting plans, right, to transition into cleaner sources of generation, and so they'll set out a plan for how they're going to accomplish that, moving from coal to cleaner sources. You've asked what are the dynamics of coal. Well, you can't really ramp up and ramp down coal in an economically feasible way. You fire up the plant and you need to keep it running. And so you can end up with, and generally do, end up with excess electricity that you may not need. And so for Alberta, they'll trade that into the system when they don't need it, sell it to someone else. We've had a long-standing trading relationship with Alberta, which just makes sense. We're neighbors. Everybody's system is different, and everybody has different compatibilities. And so we've always traded with Alberta. And again, it's the flexibility of our system that's really the source of decisions to trade, to give them electricity when they may be at a peak time and can't provide it themselves. There's lots of discussion about potentially thinking about enhancing our relationship and helping to bridge, be part of the solution to bridge them from coal to new sources of electricity that are part of their future plan.
I've got to get you to hang on for just a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
How much power do we generate at any given time in BC versus how much we need?
Right. Well, I think one of the important things to think about is, as a jurisdiction, there's a choice has been made that we will be electricity self-sufficient. So one overall concept is that we can serve our own needs at any given time. We don't actually build generation in order to export it or for anything other than just serving our customers. And so at any given time, we're generally generating the amount of electricity that we need at any given time. We may be at a peak point in the day, or we may be at a peak time in terms of seasons, and we'll be generating more because of that. And in the middle of the night, and in mild weather, we'll be generating a lot less. So what we're generating or not is first and foremost influenced by how much we in British Columbia need as our customer base. But then we'll also calibrate a little bit on top of that in terms of where there may be opportunistic trade opportunities. So, once again, I'll go back to the thought that we don't ever build for export, for example. But because our system is so highly flexible, we can and do trade opportunistically so that we get a better price differential for our own ratepayers. And so we'll do that in order to keep our rates as low as possible. We'll sell high and buy low, the basic tenet of any trade relationship, right? But we'll do that so that we are keeping our prices as low as possible.
And we're able to do that because of the nature of our
flexibility.
power generation.
That's absolutely the key. It's the flexibility of our system. If we weren't so fortunate as to have the large hydroelectric backbone, we'd have limited trade opportunities. We'd probably be trading because we needed to rely on a neighboring jurisdiction to meet our own needs in those peak times. Instead, we know that we can. We're always self-sufficient. But we're always looking to keep rates as low as possible on paper.
So how do you plan for LNG when for a number of years there was this sense that there were going to be 7, 8, maybe even 9 major projects that might come online over a 10-year period, and now there's uncertainty around that. So how do you start to plan for that in a way that gives you long-term forecasting, build the appropriate infrastructure, but not overbuild if you don't need it?
Right. So for LNG, it's been very interesting. I mean, it's an exciting sector for British Columbia. And we work very closely with the individual companies as to what their needs are. There are just a few that have proposed electrification from the grid, and so we focus very closely on exactly what their needs are anticipated to be, what their timing is, what would influence any changes, and we work closely with them on that. And then, of course, we watch the entire sector in terms of their activity in what we call the upstream, the extraction up in the Northeast, because that too uses electricity. So, like any other sector, we closely work with them, monitor, we manage within ranges rather than trying to be on the specific dot. We have a probabilistic scenario for all of the inputs, and we're constantly adjusting.
So part of the mix in that is, where are we at as far as power generation is concerned? You talked about the 79 dams, but many of those are aging, and some of them considerably. The mandate is, outside of Site C, you can't go around building any new dams. So what do we do there if one of those has to be shut down for maintenance or a refit?
Well, I mean, that's a very important issue for us right now. The system is, generally speaking, it's getting to be about 50 years old. So I talked about the great outcomes that we've come to rely on and expect in terms of our electricity, the reliability, the affordability, the clean nature of it, and of course we want to maintain those outcomes for future generations. And what that means for us right now is significant reinvestment in the system. And we have a very significant capital project portfolio that we're undertaking for refurbishment. Some of it is also for expansion. We talked about the population growth, so there's always that side of it. But refurbishment of the system is a major focus for us. I tend to think of BC Hydro as a company, as one that was initially a building company, building these assets, building the system, and then a few decades of maintaining and operating it, and now we're permanently both, right? We're constantly in the capital project space of refurbishing and building and expanding the system and maintaining and operating it. But the investment that's required in order to ensure that the system keeps on operating the way we've come to expect is really substantial. We expect to invest about 1.7 or 1.8 billion per year.
Per year?
Yeah, over this 10-year period, probably at the same level. Our projections show for 10 years after that. And then Site C is an additional project. I purposely took it out of those. Yeah, I purposely didn't include it in that 1.7 to 1.8. When you include Site C as obviously our largest project, in this 10-year period that we're in right now, we'll spend about 2.3 or so billion per year, and when that project is completed, we'll dip down to the 1.7, 1.8 level.
This is our second break. It'll take just a moment. We'll be back shortly.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So if we are meeting our energy demands right now, why do we need Site C? What's the reasoning behind the building of Site C?
Yeah, well, you put the question in a great way. You know, if we don't need it right now, why are we building it? We're building it because we project to need it in about a decade from now. We will need it. It's planned to come into operation in 2024, and our projections, show that we will need it in 2024. We will need it mostly because we need the capacity in the system. When I say that, I'm referring back to this idea of needing the system to be flexible enough to be able to meet our peak needs. And we won't be by 2024. We'll have a deficit that is significant enough that we need an asset as big as Site C. Plus, by that point, we will also be on the cusp of needing a sixth generating unit at Revelstoke.
A sixth?
So we don't
that capacity exists to grow into that sixth generator.
Revelstoke. Mike, one of our large dams that many people will know about, was built for 6 and originally had 4 put in. Revelstoke also was built for 6, and we'll be putting the 6th one in. So we don't just need Site C by 2024. We need Site C plus more capacity right around that time. So, when your question being, why do we need Site C if we have enough energy today, is because you can't just turn around tomorrow and have the asset that you need in order to serve the population that has grown. Between now and 2024, the industrial and commercial loads that we anticipate to be needing energy, you have to build now for something that will be there in the mid-2020s when the need is there. And as I've said, our capacity need will be the greatest, and Site C actually won't even be enough.
So if that's the case, if we take a look at the the mandate to bring on independent power producers, we're in a bit of a lull right now. There is no new work going on. I think Kokish may have been one of the last that has come on stream. Would it not behoove us to also be focusing on those, because those seem to have a lower environmental footprint?
Well, there's a lot of points that I want to make on that. So one of them is that we actually do have IPPs still coming on stream in British Columbia. IPPs is independent power production, which is those smaller developments that the private sector undertakes, and then we purchase the energy from them. And we have about 20, just over 20 of them under development today. One of them was just announced last week, Serpentine Creek, another run-of-river IPP coming into the system. We have a standing offer program that continues to be open and taking in applications with energy purchase agreements being issued. So
contrary to some of the things that I'm hearing, that whole sector is laying dormant right now. That's not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's being referred to is it's been a while since there's been a massive call for large-scale energy, and the last one was around 2008. And so that was a big event for British Columbia when a sector really came into massive growth opportunities because of the call. As I've said, we now have 25% of our system being served by independent power production, and we actually wouldn't be able to rely on independent power production to meet our needs in 2024, because generally speaking, independent power production doesn't provide that capacity factor. It, generally speaking, provides the intermittent energy. So it wouldn't help us to add a lot of wind or run-of-river into the system. Now, I want to just remind you that I've just said we do have a standing offer program. We will be taking in, at a smaller scale, independent power production. But on the scale of Site C, it wouldn't help us if we had taken in run-of-river and wind, et cetera, because what we would have is intermittent energy that we couldn't firm in the system on the capacity side. In fact, we're going to be running a capacity deficit if we don't have Site C.
Who knew electricity was so fascinating? But I got to get you to hang on for just 1 second. We'll be back in just a moment.
Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program.
So I know that there are a lot of people who go, but I'm hearing this message saying we don't need the power from Site C, and others saying we do. We've got First Nations who are saying I don't want it, and of course there are landowners that are in the Peace River area who are saying, but my land is going.
Site C is a big project. You know, some people have referred to it as the, you know, the biggest mega project BC's ever undertaken. You know, I don't know if it's true or not, to be honest. I don't know who came up with those metrics, but it's a big project. And I think it's appropriate that there's a lot of interest, there are a lot of different opinions, and I think it's great that people voice their opinions, and lots of questions constantly asked and answered, and the discussion continues. But there is a need to meet our electricity needs in the province. And, you know, at the end of the day, one of the answers has to be yes. As a Crown corporation, you know, we're not an investor-owned utility. We're not looking for the commercial opportunity or the one that can, you know, drive, you know, some kind of special, you know, profit-oriented benefit for the company. We're looking for the option that is the most affordable, most reliable, and cleanest. And that's Site C. It's been studied for years and years. It's gone through a lot of rigor, testing whether or not those are the right, that it is the right, you know, answer for the question. It is the most reliable. It provides that capacity factor, unless we were to go to gas. In which case we're making a choice that we're not going to maintain the same levels of a clean system that the province has been committed to this point. We would also run some risk in terms of affordability. Gas is cheap right now, but it is a commodity and the price fluctuates, and we've seen very high prices in the past. We'll see high prices again at some point in the future. And so running it through, you know, all of the lenses and putting it through tremendous scrutiny in terms of its impacts, how they can be mitigated, and at the end of the day, how it stacks up against the other options. It's been rigorously tested, and it's the answer that we need to move forward on if we're going to be able to provide electricity for the province in the future.
So as one of your customers, I have to ask, okay, 1.8 million a year plus Site C, you're the third lowest electrical rates in North America. Are we going to stay?
Yeah, that's a really good
affordable?
question. It's a very good question. You know, we do have a mandated plan from the government in terms of the rate increases that we're allowed to introduce year over year. They've you know, given us direction under a 10-year rates plan in terms of the how the rates will be set in order to fund these capital projects. And we were third lowest rates in North America for residential customers at the outset. We're now entering the third year of that rates plan. We're still the third lowest. It's because we're not alone in terms of needing to invest in our infrastructure. This is common in Canada, in North America, globally. The amount of investment that needs to go into electricity infrastructure is, you know, it's a common issue, and I'm watching our rates very, very closely. You know, we have challenges in terms of ensuring that we continue to manage within this rates plan. You know, we've talked about how there's fluctuation, for example, in our customer base. That means that there's fluctuation in our revenues. That means for me, you know, as the CEO, we've got to go and look at, well, where can we make some shifts and adjustments to ensure that we're working within the revenues that we have and the rates that have been approved.
Thank you for coming in and doing this.
Thanks, Stu.